Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very, very important, urgent truth at the ballot, defending our vote against disinformation. Now, we have all been receiving mailers and everything in the mail and confusing our voters and our members, and we want to make sure that you get the right information. So, this is a very important panel discussion. Please pull out your pen and your pad so you can take notes. We'll send you a recording as well. But before we jump into it, I want to turn it over to our president of the Virginia State Conference, President Reverend Cozy Bailey.
Thank you, Gayleen. And good evening to all the freedom fighters out there and all the other people who are on this particular session this evening. Thank you so much for setting aside this time on a Sunday evening. As Gayleen said, the information that you are going to get is critical information. As we have, again, as she said, been bombarded with disinformation, and disinformation is the right word. There is no mistake in what these people are trying to do, trying to create even more chaos and confusion. But this evening, we have a lineup of very esteemed people, people that we call trusted messengers, and they will provide you the right information so that you can make the right choice and right decision, and then go out and tell others that at the end of the evening, you will hear this more than one time. You do not have to guess, just vote yes. Again, thank you all, and enjoy the information that you're going to get. Learn something, and continue to do your civic duty. With that, I will turn it over to my partner here in leadership of the Virginia State Conference, the Youth and College President, Jalen Vince.
Thank you for that, Reverend Bailey. Hello, everyone. Jalen Vince, your Youth and College State President, representing all of the young people 25 and under here in the Commonwealth. As said and as noticed, we have a lot of false information being shared around. Just yesterday, I was watching TV and I saw the ad campaign that was encouraging people to vote no, saying that President Obama himself was encouraging that effort. We know that is not true, and that is why we're here tonight, to encourage you all to not only vote yes, but also make sure you have the proper information so that way you know why we're encouraging to vote that way, and why we need to also make sure that we're influencing our community members and partners to vote the right way, which is the yes way. And with that, I will now pass it over to our fearless leader, Mr. Chairman Leon Russell.
Thank you, Jalen. And good evening, Virginia. It is exceedingly important that not just the folks who are watching this program this evening understand the difference between misinformation and disinformation. It's important that you explain to all of your neighbors, all of your relatives, everyone in your community the difference, and that you say to them that voting yes is a necessity. I am very much aware, and I hope that you all are as well, that today an oligarch, a, a would-be monarch, was overthrown by the power of the vote. And it is amazing to me that in a country where democracy was thought to be suppressed, that 77 or 78% of the eligible voters in Hungary turned out to turn their oligarch out. You need to be aware and make your folks aware of the power of the vote, the importance of the vote, and the importance of understanding why it's important. As a Virginian by birth, I understand that Harry Flood Byrd Sr. had no problem with Black folks voting as long as he could control the message and the numbers. That's where we are today. And so as we go through this program this evening, I need you to understand and work with all of us to ensure that history does not repeat itself, that our votes are not suppressed, that we understand what's going on here and that you urge everyone that you talk to vote yes. So thank you. Have a great program. I look forward to listening in as much as I can before I join the National Youth Work Committee.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Russell. And thank you, President Bailey and President Vince, for your greetings. Before I introduce our panel and our moderator, I want to thank our units. You have been doing town halls, you have been out here at the polls, and I want to thank you all and making phone calls. Thank you all for the work that you are doing because this is a critical time in our lifetime right now. And on April Fool's Day, President Bailey, myself, and many of our members, we did a press conference on disinformation. And it really received great attention through the media and really got the conversation going. So this panel discussion will really add to this in terms of bringing awareness to what's happening right now during this critical election. I am honored to introduce our moderator is Karen Finney. She's a political strategist, communications expert, and we've seen her on CNN and we've seen her on MSNBC, and we just want to thank her for just answering the call to help moderating this panel. Our panelist is going to be Congressman Bobby Scott, who's been a champion for our NAACP agenda and all people's agenda in terms of what's fair and right, and he is the dean of the Congress for us here in Virginia. Then we have Tony Fairfax, who's the Census Channel LLC. Tony has been instrumental in doing geo mapping and redistricting and demographics, and he's very, very well versed on this information. We have Attorney Victoria Clark. She is a voter protection director for Virginians for Fair Elections. We also have Dr. Eric Clavell. He is a political strategist and attorney, and he's at Norfolk State as well. And we have Melanie Campbell, who is the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. We have an expert panel, so break out your pen and pad and take some notes, and I'm turning it right over to you, Karen.
All right. Thank you so much, Gayleen, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, panelists. I was so excited actually when Gayleen asked me to do this because I don't understand what's going on, and I know. Because when I see the ads, I get confused. And I have family in Martinsville, Virginia, and they ask me, and I keep having to check my notes to make sure I say it right. But I'm so glad now I'm going to tell them, you don't have to guess, just vote yes. I'm going to commit that to memory because that's really powerful and easy. But it's also so important. We know that our people are targets of disinformation campaigns at higher rates than anybody else. And it's because we know what they're trying to do when they do this. And so thank you all for all the work you're doing, because this is so important that people understand what's happening, know how to get it right, and know how to make their voices heard in the way that they want it to be heard without disinformation getting in the way. So we're going to start with Congressman Bobby Scott, who is, I should say, the distinguished Congressman Bobby Scott, who is going to kind of put this in context, kind of tell us the state of play, but also kind of give us a historic view just of when we're talking about the census. Why are we talking about the census and its role in redistricting? Why are you hearing about that? Just so we're all kind of on the same page. So Congressman, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you for all your good journalistic work over the years. You've done a great job. It's certainly a pleasure to be on the call with the national chair, Leon Russell, and the state chair and political action committee chair, Cozy Bailey, and Gayleen Knoyton. And Melanie Campbell has done a great job over the years with the national voter registration, voter empowerment. So it's great to invite her to Virginia for this conversation. And my other friends on the call from Virginia. I've been asked to kind of put the thing in perspective how we got here. It starts off with this simple process, what's called reapportionment. You have 435 members of the House of Representatives, and each state gets a proportional amount. They have a mathematical formula, and Virginia was entitled to 11 members of Congress, and each state gets their requisite number. That's usually then the next process is, after you've gotten the number, you have to draw your districts so you can find out where in Virginia 11 will come from. And because of the Supreme Court cases, mostly in the 1960s and maybe a little before and a little after, has to be one man, one vote. So there are parameters on how the districts get drawn. But we know that they can be drawn one way or another way that will be outcome determinative. And we've seen just in this go round, when the president told Texas, find me 5 seats, they redrew their lines and came up with 5 new Republican seats. So how you draw the lines can be very important. Generally, it's done by the legislature. In Virginia, a few years ago, we went to a commission with the Supreme Court backup, and so the Supreme Court ended up drawing our lines. And usually that's it for the next 10 years. You wait for the next census. But last year, North Carolina decided in the middle of this situation to redraw their lines. They had a 7-7 congressional delegation, 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. And as they went to the polls and elected a Democratic governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, they had configured the lines and ended up with 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Now, that's just not political shenanigans, it's policy shenanigans, because those 3 votes were exactly enough to deny Democrats the majority of the House. We would have had 218, they would have had 217. And instead, they have the majority. And with that majority, they passed that big, ugly bill where they cut health care, cut SNAP benefits, gave tax cuts to the wealthy, ran up the debt, won't ask questions about the war, won't ask questions about what ICE is doing. How did we get $4 a gallon gasoline? On and on. They're in control because of those 4 votes. Now, the passing of voter suppression laws. As I indicated, Trump was so enamored with that, he went to Texas, said, find me 5 more votes. And then he went to Missouri, find me another vote. Came back to North Carolina to get Don Davis, because he had won. They thought they'd gotten him last time. They thought they'd done 11 to 3. They'd only done 10-4. And so they're coming after Don Davis, so redrawn the line in North Carolina. Now, the fact of the matter is, in Congress, there's very little persuasion going on. If you like health care, Democrats are for it, Republicans are against it. If you like voting rights, Democrats are for it, Republicans are against it. If you want to change the vote outcome, you're not going to persuade many people. You've just got to change the numbers. And if they keep picking up seats, 4 new votes for the SAVE Act, the voter suppression bill, 4 more votes to cut health care, another vote here, another vote there, we'll never catch up. And we have to decide whether we're going to be chumps and just watch or respond. California decided we're not going to be chumps, we're going to respond. They decided to redraw their lines too. And so Virginia is in the process of doing the exact same thing as the Republicans have done. There is a couple of differences between what the Republicans have done and what the Democrats have done. The Democrats in California and Virginia let the voters decide. In Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, they went behind closed doors and just did it. There's another problem with the way the Republicans have done it. And 4 of the 5 seats in Texas were represented by Blacks and Hispanics. The Missouri seat, Emanuel Cleaver, a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And as I indicated, Don Davis, another member of the Black Caucus. Those are the seats they're going after. They're just waiting for the Louisiana versus Calais case, a voting rights case, and they hope they're going to win the case. We hope they lose it so that the Voting Rights Act stays intact. But if they win that case, they're going to redraw the lines and eliminate African-American seats in Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida. And so all we're trying to do is level the playing field and do exactly what they have done. Now, to show how weak their argument is against equity, they have resorted to misrepresentations and lies, having President Obama's picture over a slogan that says, vote no. thankfully, I'm getting the sense that most voters in Virginia recognize lies when they see it. Republicans are used to it, but this misrepresentation is absolutely reprehensible, and we have to spend all our time responding to lies rather than promoting the strength of our argument. We learned in Swift Boat in Atlanta campaign, Swift Boat, if you don't respond to allegations and doesn't matter how ridiculous they are, if you don't respond, people are going to believe them. And so if we don't respond to these lies, people are going to believe them. So we have to spend all our time responding to lies rather than pointing out that all we're doing is leveling the playing field. And if you are interested in healthcare, education, jobs, um, uh, voting rights, that if you're interested in getting out of the war, that you should not guess, you should vote yes.
Thank you, Congressman. That was very helpful. You know, it's interesting, Tony, I'm going to come to you next to help us kind of put this further in context. And also because, I mean, this point about disinformation is so important because we know that when people hear information, if it's not challenged, the other reason why we have to spend our time making sure people have the correct information is if you hear something and it's not challenged, then of course you're going to think it's true. So if we're not there to debunk it, then people don't know what the truth is. And certainly in the context of this campaign, though, what we've seen is disinformation that is also meant to really confuse us and really using some of our very own messages, messengers, sort of just twisting, distorting, lying, again, to try to make it so that people just don't know which way is up. And also, I would love for you to talk about just again reminding us. I mean, the congressman talked about some of the things that are on when we're talking about what's happening in Congress, but also, I mean, the whole point of the Constitution and then the Voting Rights Act, right, was to make sure that we, the people, pick our elected officials. Elected officials don't pick their voters, and that representation matters, that making sure that we have people who represent our interests and our communities. Actually, that's a value of this country that they're trying to essentially erase. So I would love for you to kind of talk to us about the disinformation and sort of how do we make sense of which way is up.
Thanks, Karen. What I want to do is dig a little deeper into what the congressman just went over and put some things in perspective. I also want to first let us define mid-decade redistricting. And mid-decade redistricting has been going on for decades, since modern day redistricting, since the 60s. But mid-decade redistricting is normally going through litigation, meaning that there is a jurisdiction that draws a plan, a person or a group of people will file suit for against that jurisdiction because of that plan. A court would deem that that plan violates the U.S. Constitution or the state constitution or the redistricting criteria, and the court will demand that that jurisdiction redraw the districts. That's not what's going on now. That is the normal aspect of mid-decade redistricting. That's not what's going on now. And so my starting point that I like to go through really is about 7 or 8 months ago. That, in my opinion, is the pivotal point of a change in our redistricting process that we're looking at today. And that was when Donald Trump, in essence, directed Texas to draw 5 additional GOP districts. Now, it's important to note that Texas had already gone through its redistricting process. The Republicans in Texas, the governor, the state house, the state senate, were all controlled by Republicans. They were satisfied with that plan, right? Now, people of color, Black and brown people in Texas weren't satisfied. They thought that that plan, and I'm speaking of the previous plan, diluted minority voting strength and also was partisan. So what Donald Trump got them to do was to take a plan that many Black and brown people felt was a bad plan and made it even worse. And so adding 5 additional GOP districts to it. But what really happened, what really was a pivotal moment, a paradigm shift, if you will, is that Donald Trump didn't care about, the partisanship, fairness of Texas or the configuration. He was looking at really one thing. He was looking at the midterms. He was looking at adding additional GOP districts to give him a cushion or give them a cushion in the midterms. So it didn't matter really the state or the configuration or how partisan a particular state does. He's looking at that number. You can imagine that if you took the United States and visualize that and erase the state boundaries, all right? So you have this huge jurisdiction called the United States. That's what he's looking at. He's looking at adding additional GOP districts to that huge jurisdiction. It's not about what's fair in a particular state. It's about adding the particular numbers to actually make sure that that threshold 218 is actually crossed or not crossed with the GOP. So if we take this paradigm shift of the national redistricting effort or process, what came next was California. And the reason why I start 7 or 8 months ago is basically because what Governor Gavin Newsom said. Gavin Newsom at that time said, if Texas adds 5 GOP districts, California is going to add 5 Democratic districts, meaning that the starting point for this really was Texas adding those 5 GOP districts. And so the rhetorical question is, why 5? And I say that from the context that they could have added 6. They could have added 7 districts, but they chose 5. Why did they choose 5? Or just by happenstance, they could have chosen 5. But doesn't matter. The circumstance was that 5 actually equalized the number of districts in this national scheme that we are now looking at. Not a state by state, we're looking at nationally. So the GOP added 5 districts to Texas. California added 5 districts, Democratic districts. That equalized this now to a level playing field. So we're back to square one. We're equal. But as we know that the story continues, and Donald Trump directed them to go to Missouri, and they added 1, and North Carolina, they added 1, and Ohio, they added 2 more. So if you look at Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio, that's 4, and you add that to the Texas, you now end up with 9 additional GOP districts nationwide in this nationwide scheme that we're looking at. So right at this particular moment, you have 9 additional GOP districts. On the Democratic side, you have what? You have California, you have 5. What's the difference between 5 and 9? I kind of chuckle because Eric Lavelle in the last town hall, he was a moderator. He mentioned I didn't know math was going to be on this presentation. And so you got your calculators. The difference between 9 and 5 is 4. Bam, that's Virginia. And so Virginia now, if and when it's successful, will bring the number of Democratic districts up to 9, and the GOP districts will be at 9. And so you have an equal playing field back again. And so the importance of that is that if someone who wants to be convinced and they're against partisan gerrymandering, you can tell them that this is not about partisanship. This is about fairness. It's about equalizing the playing field. So if they're a Republican and they're about fairness, if they're an independent and they're about fairness, and if they're a Democrat about fairness, then there's no other way to equalize those districts that have been added unless Virginia's ballot initiative passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And that's so important that we talk about Texas, because I remember at the time that, when the Texas legislators, the Black and Latino legislators, and a couple of the white, the sort of Democrats left town, and people were making fun, like, well, what's the big deal? They're going to have to go back at some point and they're going to lose. But what they did that was so important, and I always want us to give them credit, is they brought national attention to what was going on. Because to your point, Trump and his allies had a bigger picture because already, let's just also remember back then that the Trump agenda was losing steam in popularity. That's when the numbers were going down. So they knew they were going to be in trouble in a midterm election if people had the opportunity to vote to the strength of our voices and our representation, and that they had to do something. And also, there are historical trends that suggest, with the exception of when Joseph Biden was in power, that, the party in power doesn't do so well in the midterm. So they kind of knew they had things going against them, and took this bigger picture and decided, okay. And you got to give it to the man, because he was real clear. He said, give me 5. Just like he said, give me 11,000 to Georgia back in 2020. He said to Texas, hey, find me 5. And one of the things that's so important about what's happening in Virginia, and Victoria, I'm going to come to you next, but one of the reasons I'm so proud of the work that groups like the NAACP have actually been doing all over this country, because we were a critical part of the California initiative. But our own governors have said, look, and our own state legislatures said, this man doesn't know what he's messing with, because if they assumed that they had the power to gerrymander themselves into, protecting themselves from accountability from voters. And our folks stepped up and said, no, 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 not so fast. We will fight you with everything we've got, because that's not fair. And to your point, we, in California, and they made it clear in California, as we have it in Virginia, this is temporary to try to right these wrongs, because we still, our values are clear here and what we're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate all that background. And Victoria, I know you have a presentation to share with us that I think also helps kind of puts this in context and makes it easy for people like me to understand, because I'm still just saying yes in my brain. But it's so important, and it's important people understand both what's happening in Virginia, and again, as Tony and the congressman have done, that, and our other speakers are going to do this, what's happening in Virginia in the context, and why you're hearing different things, mid-decade redistricting, and what on the census, and why all these things actually are part of this same conversation. So Victoria, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Thank you so much. And in a perfect world, every voter in Virginia would have been right here with us to hear Congressman Scott's and Tony Fairfax's eloquent and thorough explanation of this midterm redistricting, right? But they're not. People have a lot of things to do. Some people at work, people are taking care of their families, and people just don't have time or energy or even sometimes access to be as politically attuned or pay as much attention as we do. And that's where disinformation comes in. So give me a moment, please, to share my screen. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to spot political disinformation. So quickly, I want to talk about disinformation versus misinformation. So misinformation is false or inaccurate information spread without the deliberate intent to deceive. So that could be something that's incorrect that you just don't know. But what we're going to talk about is disinformation. This is false information spread deliberately to deceive. It's often funded, targeted, and weaponized. So in election disinformation, it targets specific communities to suppress or mislead voters. Redistricting is especially vulnerable It's complex. Most voters don't follow it closely, and it's something that doesn't happen as often to vote on. For example, in Virginia, just every year you're voting on an elected official at some level. So it's easy to know who the people are. But redistricting, there's not an actual person. When you think of vote yes, there's not a person you're voting for, which makes it especially vulnerable to disinformation. And I want to give you an example. This is a mailer a lot of people throughout Virginia received. It says, just like Jim Crow, they want to silence your voice. And there are some images that are purportedly civil rights era images. And it says, vote no and return your ballot immediately to ensure your voice is heard. Here in the bottom right corner, you can see the other side of that, Pay for Democracy and Justice PAC with an address. So let's look at the anatomy of this mailer. Just like Jim Crow, they want to silence your voice. Vote no and return your ballot immediately. Paid for by the Democracy and Justice PAC with this address in Williamsburg. So there are quite a few red flags in this mailer. So first is the emotional manipulation, evoking civil rights era images, using terms like Jim Crow, saying they want to silence your voice, especially having kind of fear imagery through using images that include the KKK, a sense of false urgency. They say, return your ballot immediately. They want you, whoever's sending this mailer, they want you to not even think about it. They just want you to go and vote no immediately. Now, when we're evaluating any type of information we're getting to see whether it's legitimate or whether it's disinformation, this is going to be one of the biggest flags, which is false urgency. They don't want you to think. And if someone doesn't want you to think, that's a problem. Think about why they don't want you to think something through. It's an unvetted PAC. Who funds this? So the name is Democracy and Justice PAC. So on its own, like, oh, it sounds like, we want democracy, we want justice, but you always need to look up the source. This is the disclaimer funding. The funding disclaimer, any political mail that you receive should have who it's paid for by. If it does not have on it who it's paid for, who's paid by, then that's also a red flag if they're not saying who this is coming from. But you want to say, like, oh, I haven't heard of Democracy and Justice. Let me Google them to see who it is. And then this misleading Jim Crow comparison. So the rule is absolutely always check who paid for a mailer. You can use vpap.org, the Virginia State Board of Elections, or you can use a simple Google search. There have been a lot of news articles about Democracy and Justice PAC, and so you can read through there to see where this disinformation is actually coming from. So the steps: check the source, evaluate the emotional imagery. If someone is mailing you something, I know if I received a mailer and it had images of Klansmen on it, that would spark certain emotions in me. And so you want to think, if this is somebody that I should trust, why would they be sending images of the KKK to my home? That's not really the behavior of someone who's on your side. False urgency, they don't want you to think. Vague claims, they want to silence you. Who is they? How do they want to silence me? You want to demand specifics and evidence. Misleading comparison. So Jim Crow references without factual grounding. The mailer made no connection between actual Jim Crow era policies and the vote that's actually coming up. And then always, always, always watch out for AI generated content. So we have no way to verify if those images are real or not. and you want to do some digging if you have time. But when you're looking at images, say like, have I seen these before? And if not, why not? Are they real? So images, voices, videos, if they seem slightly off, if they seem too perfect, um, at this point, I would say verify any imagery or videos that you're seeing to make sure that they're authentic. I'll briefly go over some disinformation in other formats. So the 2016 election, the Black community was a large target by Russian kind of disinformation sources. They created a lot of images like this "Never Forget Eric Garner," and they used images such as this to persuade Black voters to either not vote at all or to vote for Republican candidates. Also, the Twitter account 10 GOP, this everyone thought that this was the Tennessee Republican Party's official Twitter. It was very popular, had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of followers online. Celebrities used it, even elected officials used this account, followed this account, and reposted their materials. And it turned out to be an actual foreign entity controlling this account. So this account was created specifically to put out disinformation. And then finally, this is a screenshot from Facebook of an article about Denzel Washington criticizing President Obama, and it's from a website, usaprides.com. But it turns out this is not real at all. USA Prides is not a valid news source. But especially a lot of people on Facebook, they just see the headline and repost and go, and that's how disinformation spreads widely. So here's what you can do right now. One, verify the source of every political mailer, ad, or social post before sharing. Two, look up the funder of any political mailer. Number three, call 866 Our Vote to report voter suppression or misinformation. You can even call and ask about a specific mailer you received. And number four, and most importantly, be a trusted messenger. Share accurate information from verified sources in your community. Because once you receive or ingest a piece of disinformation, it really takes power through the spreading of that disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for all of that. It's so important. And, we were just saying before we came on, if this election, if what we're seeing here is any indication, this is barely the tip of the iceberg of what we are going to see the farther we get into these midterm elections. And probably, unfortunately, disinformation campaigns are part of elections going forward, which I think makes our trusted networks so much more valuable and trusted sources of news and information. And Eric, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I'm going to start with my sister Melanie Campbell because I know, Melanie, you and I have talked about this. We've talked about this specifically. We've talked about disinformation. And one of the things we've talked about also is just how important our grassroots work is and that sort of person-to-person engagement in particular. Because look, one of the other things, Victoria, I might add is, ask somebody who knows. Maybe don't just, don't ask the internet, ask Google, but don't ask Twitter, called X, or TikTok, sorry. But ask people, this is part of why we have to be in our communities so that people have sources of information. So Mel, would you talk about that a bit and sort of some of these grassroots strategies that we can use to kind of flip the script on some of this and help make sure people have the right information that they need?
Well, thank you, Karen. And I would be remiss without just doing a shout out to all the leaders in Virginia NAACP, and of course, Congressman Scott, always fighting with a smile, but don't let the smile fool you. Really, one of the things I think is really important and great to be here with all of you all the colleagues here, because at the end of the day, we have a few more days, and we got to really find a way to continue to push to get folks, just like I think it was earlier, I heard someone say, don't guess, just vote yes, right? Because right before I got on this call, saw one of those ads again, right there. This is with Obama and the image, and what's concerning about that in this moment is that President Obama is still seen. We just finished doing some research, as you know, Karen, with hit strategies, and President Obama is high on the list of people seeing him as a trusted source. So they may not see anything, but Obama said no. That's it. So we got to really uh, uh, go deep in everybody. It's like we have to treat this like a general election, because because at the end of the day, this is a test of what they can get away with. Because the truth of the matter is, we know it's about power. So being able for folks to understand that this is about taking your power away, and as Congressman said, the things that you're concerned about are tied to this vote. Understanding that this vote yes can help us stop the fact that 300,000 Black women, especially in a state like Virginia, really bringing the message home. So many folks especially across the country, but in states like Virginia and Maryland, where people have lost a lot of federal jobs, this in a way will affect that. Why? Because it's about the power of who controls the unfettered power that this current administration is taking, and that the current leadership in the Congress is allowing to happen. And we're barely, still the courts are doing what they're doing, but we're at this inflection point at this point, whether we'll have a democracy or not have one. And so I think this is the time that, and I've been telling folks, hey, when we know we have a close election, we got to treat it like the what's on the ballot is your power, right? What's on the ballot is the jobs that you lost. You know, can you get those jobs back? What's on the ballot is they've taken our health care. And so we got to tie it, because the redistricting can as I think Brother Tony was talking about, it can get really wonky. And people are like, well, I don't get that, right? And I understand it. And it sometimes, I've been doing this for a long time, like sometimes I get confused. So being able to know that the average person needs to know, especially in an off election like this, that we have to really find ways to turn this vote up. I have real concerns that people are going to be asleep at the wheel, because it's just so much going on that they may not see this as, is this going to help? The fact that, that can't afford the gas, is this really, what does this vote have to do with what's going on with me and the attack? So as far as like organizing, which I know that we're going to hear from this call, and share it, right? Share it out, that people can get involved. Through our unity campaign and through our Black Women's Roundtable, we're just like telling everybody, get on the phone. Here's a link. Call Virginia. And Congressman, I do live in Virginia, just northern. I know y'all don't think that's Virginia, but it is. Right? We got to tell our neighbors, and quite importantly, tell our young people that this is an opportunity too, for them to deal with some of the attacks. And I think it's got to make it very, very simple. Don't guess, vote yes, and this is why. Vote yes, because this is going to help you get your jobs back. Vote yes, because this is going to help you deal with the fact that you lost your health care. Vote yes. That kind of just straight up, this vote is going to impact those things, because next year we can have a different, at least some stopgap to the madness that we're all living through. So I'll stop there. Wait for questions.
Amen to that, Melanie Campbell. Keep it simple and tie it to very real. Why are we doing this? Impacts. So important. And before we go to questions, we have Dr. Clevel here. Eric, we're going to ask you to really talk to us about the legal implications of this disinformation, and talk a little bit more about the work we can be doing, that we are doing, because I think the other thing that happens, you see something like this and you think, is anybody doing anything about this? And so I think that's part of why it's important that we know and we're able to communicate back out to folks, yes, things are happening, and we are tracking it, and we do know why this is important. So, and how we're safeguarding people, I think, is also, let's talk about that too, because for those who may not know, I mean, Victoria mentioned we wish everybody could be on this call, but for those who may not know, how we're trying to protect folks, both with our advocacy, with the brilliant people, panelists, and all of y'all who are gathered with us this evening, what can we be doing? What should we be doing? So I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me very good? Perfect. Well, once again, I want to thank the NAACP, Ms. Finney, and everyone on this call for the work that you're doing for this very, very important dialogue. Now, this dialogue goes far beyond tonight. As you've heard from my other colleagues and guests on this particular panel, this also goes to our voting integrity. Our elections are very special in the United States because they are free elections. And the world have looked upon us as an example of how to run free and fair elections. But if you notice in the last 8, maybe 10 years, you've seen a chipping away at our voting process and the integrity of it. We can go all the way back to the Holder case, where pre-clearance of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act started to become chipped away. We also can look at various cases such as United States versus Alvarez, where the United States itself became restricted, being able to ban such bad speech unless they or false speech, unless they find a certain level of tangible harm. Also, when you take a look at the liability of social media companies, when we take a look at the Section 230 of the Decency Act for social media companies, we find that it's actually the Communications Decency Act. We find that they actually have a certain level of protection where false images and false messages come about, very similar to what we call this bystander clause or bystander liability of individuals that see something happen. In other words, there have been many loopholes that have been created or where individuals that have been spreading, now we call it disinformation and misleading information, but let's just call it like it is. They're flat out lies. They've been spreading lies in order to stop the vote by confusing the vote. Now, because of our history in the United States, stopping African Americans and women from being able to vote, we've crossed a hurdle to where now when we find that type of suppression, but under this administration, we may see it again. We probably see federal officers or ICE within certain length feet from voting precincts. We haven't addressed that because we haven't hit it yet, but definitely I wouldn't take that off the table. But now what we're finding is that by simply the message, being able to control the message of how individuals vote on issues and for candidates has become the weapon of choice to distract and to stop individuals from voting and understanding the issue the proper way. So this all started when you take a look at, as I mentioned before, the Holder case. We can also take a look at the whether our president was deemed to be a citizen of the country, which of course started with the birther movement, and then with our president, he took it and wrote it to his first term in the White House. And then we cap it off with the big lie about the 2020 election being stolen, where Americans believe that and risk their own freedom, criminal charges being criminalized in order to raid the Capitol, in order to stop an election process that was fair and free. And many people still believe that, even though court after court after court, liability settlement after liability settlement, guilty plea after guilty plea showed that that is not the case. But individuals still believe it. So that should show you and all of us the power of the word, the power of the message, the power of how we can get messages out. And when we take a look at the power of how we can get messages out, the lie is powerful, but the truth is even more powerful. So we know from a from a legal standpoint of what is taking place, and those catalysts that have pushed the margins and pushed our election integrity to the edges. But what can we do as individuals that want to speak the truth? Because many people want to simply know the truth. I remember my pastor in college used to say, who's passed away, he said, "Don't tell me what you think the Bible says, tell me what it is and let me make the decision." So for those of us that want to give the word what it is and how it is and allow the voters to make the decision, it's incumbent upon us to do several things. I think one, we talked about advocacy on the ground level. I believe that policy, great policy, is started on the ground level, because the people here in the various branches of NAACP and other community groups, civic organizations, and people that are doing the work in various communities across the country, I believe they have some of the best ideas for improving their communities because they live there and they know what it takes. With that, I believe it starts with, in order to stop lies from spreading, it starts with pre-bunking false lies that are coming. If we know the tactic of the enemy, then we can help ourselves by helping others protect themselves from it. So with that being the case, I think it's incumbent upon us to start now, not just with this election, because this is a test case. And as I always say, as Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country. And I believe that this election for yes or no is going to prove that theory more so than any right now. With my good friend, Brother Fairfax, he talked about math. I did the math. I got it. I didn't have to take my calculator out either. 4 votes, 4 seats in 4 states. All right. I believe that will be the deciding measure of this midterm election. And Virginia is squarely in the middle of it. By being squarely in the middle of it, it will determine whether the Republicans who have abrogated their voice and their power, other people, continue to do that for the next 2 years for this president and this administration that have no concept of checks and balances or proper order. Or will it flip and the president's administration will be held accountable and have to go through the proper channels of checks and balances by speaking the voice of the people? Will they? It's 4 states, 4 seats, 4 congressional votes. I believe will decide this particular race. So pre-bunking from the ground level. Also, very quickly, when we look at policy on the state level and also the federal level, there have been, of course, a legislation introduced on the federal level with a companion bill from the judiciary of the Senate, with a companion bill in the House, in order to provide more accountability for social media platforms and also individuals who are pushing false narratives, not accountability for them and protections from the voters. So on the state, federal level, more policy. On the ground level, pre-bunking, because as Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country.
That's right. All right. Thank you. And so I don't see too many questions in the Q&A. I saw one that I think got answered. But I just have one. Galen, I see you about to say something. Otherwise, I was going to just...
No, you could go ahead and ask your questions. I do have some questions, though. They've been texting.
Oh, great.
They've been texting me on my phone.
Okay. Of course they have.
There's watch parties going on right now. Groups of people are watching this together, and they're texting me. So go ahead.
Well, I think that makes all of us happy. No, let's go to the questions that people have been texting you, because those are, we want to make sure we're being responsive to what people want to know.
Great, thank you. I think Congressman Scott wanted to say something quickly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to reemphasize what Eric was talking about. According to experts, there are only a handful of seats really in play in this election, maybe 30, but through toss-ups, maybe 12. And if you're talking about stealing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seats, there's no way for the Democrats ever to catch up and change the seats that would make it possible for us to legislate. And so these 4 seats may well make the difference in whether or not they'll be able to pass another big ugly bill and take away health care, SNAP benefits, and give tax cuts to the wealthy, not ask questions about stuff going on. And so I think it's crucial that we level the playing field and not let them get an unfair advantage just by stealing seats while we're sitting around like chumps watching it happen.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I'll just add before I get to you, Gayleen, I think it's also, I mean, we've all heard people saying, well, what are Democrats doing? What are you doing? What are people doing to fight back? This is something we can all do directly. Virginia has an opportunity to fight back directly, to say we're not chumps, as the congressman said, but also we're not going to take it. You're trying to cheat. We know what you're doing. You're trying to take our power. Also, in Texas, you're trying to take away and in other places, you're trying to take away our members who represent us, and we're not going to stand for it. And so I think that's the other part of the conversation when people say, well, why should I pay attention to this? Yes, it's as Melanie said, did you want jobs? You want your jobs back? You want your health care? Do you want, there are real, outcomes, things that are harming our people that we can actually, if we get this right, we can stop some of that. But also, this is a way we can fight back because we have so few tools. And this is one of the most important ones I feel like we have. But Gayleen, I'll turn it over to you to roll up the questions that folks want to know.
Sure. So, Congressman Scott, I have a question. It said about North Carolina. I think that was where it first started. The question was, what impact do you think North Carolina did with this redistricting?
Well, they started it off, and those 3 seats that they stole in the last election were just enough to prevent Democrats from having a majority. If we had those 3 seats back, we'd have 218 to 217. Hakeem Jeffries would be Speaker of the House. I'd be chairman of a committee rather than ranking member. We would be able to, they never could have passed the SAVE Act, the voter suppression bill. If ICE shot somebody, we'd be holding hearings the next day. We can't hold hearings. We don't have hearings. We don't have hearings on the war. There is a substantial difference in being in the majority and the minority. If you're interested in education and healthcare and voting rights, $4 a gallon gasoline, who is in the majority makes a difference. And the 3 seats we lost in North Carolina because they just simply stole them, make all that difference. And if 3 seats can do that, think of what 5 in Texas, 1 in Missouri, another one in North Carolina, and they're just waiting for the Calais case to do another one in Louisiana, Alabama, and in Florida.
The other question, I think Congressman Scott and maybe Tony can answer it too, is you brought up the Louisiana case, but that redistricting occurred before the redistricting started. The question I had was, what is the impact and what is the status of what's happening in Louisiana right now? And why is it in the Supreme Court?
They've been suing on the Louisiana for 30 years. When I was first elected, Cleo Fields was elected as a freshman legislator. After 4 years, the Shaw v. Reno case came about, and they redrew his lines and eliminated the second African-American seat in Louisiana. Now, about 30 years later, they redrew the lines fairly again, creating a second opportunity seat for an African-American, and Cleo Fields was elected back to Congress after a 30-year absence. Now they're going after his seat again, calling it a racial gerrymander. And the question is whether or not the Voting Rights Act, the meaning of the Voting Rights Act, and if they win, they'll redraw his seat and he'll lose again. That's why that's been in and out of that Louisiana's been in and out of the courts all the while. Alabama will be subject to the same reasoning. Samari Figures was elected as a second African American coming out of Alabama in the last election. If we lose the Calais case, the Alabama legislature will go right back in session and eliminate his district.
Yeah, good. So the other question I had, thank you, Congressman Scott, that they text me was that, Tony, you might can ask this question. So they said that, that in Virginia, the redistricting is going to sunset in 2030. Does that mean that other states that has done the same thing have to sunset it too, or can they keep it?
California and Virginia did a temporary process, and so they will go back in 2030 to the normal process that they had, which was commissions. That said, Missouri, Texas, North Carolina, and Ohio, um, it's up to the state legislature. And so they could continue with the districts that they have, where Virginia and California will go back and leave that up to a commission. And I also want to address that last question that you asked about Louisiana. And the Louisiana case is an extremely important case, not because of the one district that was added. And I was fortunate, blessed enough to be an expert on the case that forced them or compelled them to add that additional district there before they actually drew their own district. But the Supreme Court, brought everybody back to actually ask questions about race. So the big component of what's going on, and when they come out in June, it may do it before, is whether race can be used in drawing districts. And so if race cannot be used, then that means potentially the majority minority districts may disappear. Other aspects may have effect, and that's not just impacting congressional. It could impact state legislative districts. It could impact local districts. So you can imagine all of the districts, the majority minority districts that could be in jeopardy if the Supreme Court decides to do that. So this is a very, very important case.
Well,
Wow.
there's another thing that can happen between now and the next redistricting, and that is the Congress could pass legislation to prohibit partisan gerrymandering. There's pending legislation now. There'll be a presidential election, so depending on who gets elected president, you could have a voting rights, somebody supporting voting rights elected in 2028. If you can elect a Democratic House now, we could pass that and then try to coerce the Senate into passing it. But if we prohibit partisan gerrymandering, all of this shenanigans will go out the window, and you'd be having fair redistricting all over the country.
Okay, thank you. Melanie, the question I have, someone said, okay, so when you see someone in the grocery store and in line, and they ask about this redistricting, what is the best way to talk to someone about why it's important to vote in this election?
Thank you, Galen, and thank you for the invitation and your leadership. Try to make it simple to folks so that they know that it will affect the things that they've been concerned about, the things that they're going through right now, that vote will help determine who can do something about it. Like at the end of the day, many of us have said it on this call. Hey, if you vote yes, then you have opportunity for the power to shift so that you can fight back against some of the things that are happening to you and your community. Because otherwise, like I said, it gets to be very esoteric and very, what does that have to do with what I'm going through right now? I can't afford to put gas in my car. Can't afford to do the groceries. I can't afford, right? And let's be clear, the other thing that the research showed us, Galen, for Black people, are still concerned about the backlash around how we're being impacted from a racism standpoint, right? From what's happening with the white nationalism. We're not just women, but Black people are under attack in this country. And the things that have been happening across the country, the attacking on our Black history and all those things, and diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, all those things are also high on the list for Black people. That we understand that the attack is very much racially charged. And that's been part of the game. So I think that's very, very important, so that you don't have to have a long elevator speech. Hey, look, you need to vote yes, so we can fight back against this attack in our communities. They're coming for us. They're trying to send us back. That's not a hard conversation, right, to have. And I think because otherwise, it can get kind of glass over. Not that people don't know, but some of this stuff is so very much very political science driven. But your power on this date between now and election day in April 21st. Am I missing the date? I hope I didn't say the wrong date.
You got it right.
Yeah, right.
April 21st.
But April 21st, thank you. And go vote now. That's the other thing. Don't wait. Early vote. Vote now. And don't tarry. And the old saying, arrive with 5. Take everybody in your family, and make sure that they take care and vote. It will make a difference, and you'll be able to see that difference because you'll be able to see a different kind of fight going on.
That's great. Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to it? Okay, great. So Victoria, I know you, under the Biden administration, one of your roles was to dispel a lot of the disinformation with COVID. Did you have any specific techniques that you used during that time?
Yeah, so thank you. So what I would say is the biggest and most important technique that everyone can take away with them is to be inquisitive, be curious about everything that you're seeing, everything that you're hearing. If it sounds fishy, then dig deeper.
Good. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's all the questions that I have now. I want to thank you all. Oh, no, go ahead,
I'm
Karen.
sorry, Queen Gayleen. I just saw one more that I just popped in that I saw in the Q&A.
Okay.
So how can people help, or how can they get involved other than phone banking? What other things can people do? And maybe y'all are going to talk about that in the next section, but helping people know resources, what else they can do. And I'll just say thank you for letting me be part of this, because now I feel like I'm clear. I knew the polity and the history, but now I feel like I'm clear. I know what's going on in Virginia, and I know how to talk about it myself. So I appreciate that, just for my own personal information.
No, we're glad because you're an influencer. So we need all the influencers as possible. Yeah, the next segment is going to be the call to action. So we'll have all that information there, and definitely want you all to stay on. But Karen, I want to thank you, and Melanie and Victoria and Tony and Congressman Scott and Eric. Thank you so much, because you always answer the call when we need you. And this is so critical. And we always say this is the most important election, but guess what? This right here is going to set a standard. And that's something that we need to talk more about. We have to remember that Virginia and California allowed the voters to decide what the maps are going to be. The other states didn't do that. The red states did not decide. They made the decision on their own. So that's another talking point that we must remember. This is a nonpartisan election. I mean, there's no DOR behind this referendum. So that's why organizations like NAACP can be involved. And as I say, everywhere we go, and all of our leaders are saying, make no mistake that the NAACP on a national, state, and local level are 100% behind this initiative, this referendum. And I was just in New Orleans, and I had a chance to talk to California, and they talked about how influential the NAACP were it was in California, and even in the other states, even in Texas. And we see a wave happening. Even though the red states are trying to cheat, we see races being won, being flipped on a local level and on a state level. There is a big wave that's going on right now. But this referendum, and as I say, it's going to be Virginia to the rescue for the nation. This referendum is going to set standards on so many levels. We are in a history-making time. So I want to thank you all for being on here. Please feel free to stay on so you can hear what we're going to be doing next. We might be calling on you again, because we have early vote ends on the 18th of Saturday, April 18th. And election day is on April the 21st. And our next group of panel is going to tell you what's available, because people are ready to go to work now. They're mad. They are mad. They're trying to trick us now. And we had to teach. And I'm going to say this real quick, and we'll go to the next one. We always talk about disinformation, and we always talk about misinformation, but we haven't been talking about how to identify it, how to tell the difference. And I think, just like you talk about fraud with credit cards and everything else, and the web, we need to say the same thing about political disinformation, and start teaching our base on how to be able to differentiate and know how to be safe going through the whole process. So thank you so much. And we will be calling on you all again, but you're welcome to stay on so you can see what we're getting ready to do. All right, everyone. So now you're ready to go to work. And I have my next group of panelists I'm going to bring on. It's going to be Jackson Miller, who's the organizing director for Virginia for Fair Elections. I'm bringing on Tyler Sterling, who's the national campaigns director for civic engagement for the National NAACP. And I'm bringing on Stephanie Owens, who's with voter protection, and also Stephanie Jones, who was the Office of General Counsel, who's helping with voter protection as well. So all of them will come on and tell us what the next steps are we're going to do. But we're going to start off first. Let me start with Jackson Miller, and then we'll go to Tyler, and then we'll wrap up with voter protection. So Tyler, Jackson, can you tell us what's happening with Virginia for fair elections?
Yeah. Hey, Madam Vice Chair, good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. Again, for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Jackson Miller. I'm born and raised in Chesterfield, but I'm coming to you from Prince William County at the moment, where it was one of the few localities in the Commonwealth that had Sunday voting today. And from what I understand, nearly 3,000 voters in Prince William County came out today after a record-breaking day yesterday in what has been, by all means, a super Saturday when it comes to voting. As many folks addressed, people are excited, the energy is up, and there will be a ton of voting happening. I think yesterday, from some accounts, it was the largest day of Saturday voting in any Virginia state election in our Commonwealth's history, meaning only presidential elections have we seen higher turnout. So this is higher than the statewide election last year. It was higher than statewide elections before. And so by all intents and purposes, this will be a high turnout election, which means that we will see millions of Virginians come to the polls, not just through this next week, but specifically on Election Day, April 21st. I think because we see the no side so dedicated to maxing out and to weaponizing lies, not just from these mailers, not just from these text messages, but now turning their attention to all of the taxes that are completely fictitious that Virginia Democrats somehow passed in the General Assembly, or how Spamberger passed, or what have you, whatever Donald Trump has said on his Truth Social. And we're also seeing at early voting sites and at polling locations that no folks who are volunteers are coming at our voters and pulling them aside and just spewing all of these lies. And so I think just in terms of what happens next and how do we not just work harder, but work smarter with the few hours that we have left until 7 p.m. on April 21st, is we need folks to be those personal touches and those friendly faces at the polls. I think that is the number one effective thing that we can be doing in terms of planning out our next week. On Election Day, please, I'll drop my email in the chat, or I'll make sure that you all have it. Reach out to me so we can plug you in, because we know that regardless of the plan of action that people have taken, people will be bombarded by lies. And just given the NAACP Virginia State Conference's history of action, history of organizing, and also just its reputation as a trusted source, this will be tremendously valuable to have folks just know that not just yes coalitions, or not just yes organizations, as well as the NAACP are backing this and are willing to show up for our voters. That's going to mean the world to yes voters in Virginia, and that will be critical to our win. So number one, working the polls on Election Day. Make sure you have my contact information, and let's plug folks in. That personal touch will be the difference in terms of how people may or may not cast their ballot. Number two, right, apart from phone banking, take note, I will not have phone banking opportunities, or we do have phone banking opportunities available. But if that's not your call, right? Number two, I know the NAACP Virginia State Conference has really just amped up an effort to have town halls with all your locals. I know I'll be swinging by the Williamsburg or Historic Triangle NAACP town hall tomorrow with Miss Pat Evers. If you are getting information about people who are, claim they're confused or anxious or frustrated, let them know when these town halls are happening so they can hear from, fellow NAACP leaders that are more local in their community, to really just hash this out. I think Victoria gave an incredible presentation on just very easy tactics that we can all apply to identify misinformation. And I think sharing that with folks in your community is incredibly valuable. So number two, invite folks that are outside your immediate circle to these town halls so they can hear from trusted voices in NAACP circles. And finally, number three, we're closing this weekend off with about 65,000 doors knocked in every single congressional district in the Commonwealth. We had leader, hopefully our future speaker, Hakeem Jeffries. He was at Parents Weekend in Charlottesville. He knows how important this is. So he carved out time away from his family to campaign with our college students, our UVA Dems, as well as with Senator Mark Warner. He was in Richmond today, where the Henrico NAACP specifically also helped recruit to turn out about 150 people to get on the doors in East Henrico, where we know we need to turn out. So again, these doors are incredibly positive. I gotta say, this timeline is wacky, but I'm not going to complain about an April get out the vote session. This weather is amazing. This weather has been incredibly refreshing. These doors are positive, and the reception on the doors is really both positive and full of gratitude. People are thanking our volunteers constantly about, thank you for clearing this up for me. Thank you for coming to my home and just answering my questions. It has absolutely been, it is not random that we are seeing tremendous waves of voting in places where we have put in the work for months to get to people's doors and to keep going at it. So again, three things that we can do. Number one, work the polls on election day. We will plug you in. Let's make sure that our voters feel welcome and that they can cast their ballot safely and securely and will not be hit with a bunch of these lies, whether it's about taxes or whether it's about these mailers. Number two, invite folks to these town halls that are still kind of waffling, right? Let's get outside of our bubbles and let's make sure that they're hearing from local leaders. And finally, number three, we're knocking all over Virginia. And a lot of local NAACPs have really stepped up and helped recruit. And I'm really grateful for that collaboration. And last but not least, Jalen, I'm going to call on you because a lot of districts in Virginia have been decided on college campuses. So on election day, we got to be dorm storming. On election day, we got to be crowd canvassing and moving our young voters to the polls, right? Whether it was on the peninsula last year, whether it was down in Blacksburg, again, some of these elections have always been won or lost thanks to the power of our youth vote. So I'm just going to plug that in. Jalen, I'm expecting a message from you, and I will yield the floor. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackson. And we have your directory of all the organizers. So if anyone needs signs, and some other items, then you can talk to the organizer in your area. That will be in the recap as well. So thank you so much, Jackson. We appreciate it. All right, Tyler, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As Galen just said, my name is Tyler Sterling. I am the National Campaigns Director here at the NAACP. And what you just previously heard at the previous session was kind of the why to the, or the, the why. We went through a historical presentation or historical data set as to how we got to this moment. We talked about the importance of it and of the grounding ourselves in the understanding of this election. What I'm going to talk about now is the how. Hopefully what just dropped into the chat here is a PDF document. Do not worry. As Karen Jones said, all of these links and things will be sent out to folks in the follow-up. But what you have in the chat there is a toolkit. And within that toolkit is a series of talking points, understanders and explainers on what is happening in this moment. But at that very bottom portion of the page, there is a a link here, a hyperlink, to go to the social media graphics. And so to the question that was in the Q&A, to what is being said about how folks can get involved on the NAACP side, first, we've got our toolkit. You want to make sure you familiarize yourself with all of that and then share the graphics that are in that toolkit as well as the information. There's a sample suggested social posts. So we're not letting you go at this alone. We got graphics and also recommended posting and talking points. But what I want to kind of call to action drive-wise is our upcoming phone banks, and then a final piece being our turf request form. Karen spoke about that. Karen Jones spoke about that in the chat, but our phone banking. So every Tuesday for the past 4 Tuesdays, we have had a phone bank where we are calling Virginia voters. And I want to say calling in particular, because just as the dis and misinformation was touched on at the beginning of this call, we need to cut through some of that noise. And how to cut through some of the noise that we are seeing on social media or getting in via text message or getting mailed directly to your door is a real conversation with someone. And so by being a volunteer, well, many of you on this call, you are already trusted messengers in your community. If you're on this call, you're already a trusted messenger. But what we want to do is leverage that name of the NAACP. You just heard from the Virginia Fighting for Fair Elections side on the NAACP name and the weight with which it brings in the Virginia State Conference. And so we want to make sure you are identifying yourself as a volunteer with the NAACP Virginia State Conference and then making that charge to push folks to go out to vote. And so the next thing that I am dropping into the chat is our phone bank sign up link. It is through the Virginia State Conference Mobilize link, and it is to sign up for our upcoming phone bank this Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30. I believe it was a Miss Brenda. Apologies if I have the wrong name. Can't bring up the Q&A right now, but she indicated that there was some fear about reaching out to voters and making these calls. And so, one, I want to say we got to strengthen this muscle for the remaining 205 days until the general election, because y'all are going to turn right back around and do all of this again and speaking it into existence that we will see positive results here. But second, we have a system. The training itself is comprehensive, and the tool that we are using to make these calls, one, it masks your number, so your personal number is not shown. Two, it is an auto dialer, so you are simply clicking next. There is no dialing of phone numbers. You are clicking next to go to the next call. And third, the script is already pre-written and loaded into that platform. So the phone banking is where I want folks to sign up and make sure you are on that call with us this upcoming Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30. And then the final piece, speaking to that doors, being on those doors. We will also have turf requests available for folks to select the precincts by which you want to knock. It has been available this whole cycle, but will be in the follow-up email and notifications that Karen Jones has spoke about to select the precincts that you want to walk through, select your parameters, and go knocking on those doors. So I want to just recap. One, we got our toolkit. All of our folks that are constantly on social media, use your social media for good right now and help us post that information. There's pre-selected scripts and suggested posts that you can use. Two is that Tuesday phone banking session. It's a sense of community. Folks are hopping on. We've got different rooms, a quiet room. We've got the technical support room. Then we've got our main room where the training sessions are happening as folks are hopping on and hopping off. That phone bank link that you will receive once you attend that training remains active from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. up until election day. And then on election day, it's about 9 p.m. to roughly 5 p.m. where that phone bank link will still be active. So we want you to attend the training, get the link, and then you are off on your own to make those calls when you see fit and fitting in your schedule. And last but not least, if you are interested in hitting the doors, and I see many folks on here that were knocking doors in 2025, that same turf request form will be available to request a door knocking and a set of specific voters sent to either minivan, or we can do some paperless. We are pushing for minivan, try to do as virtual as possible. So with that, I will pause and pass it over to the amazing and dynamic Stephanie's.
Thank you, Tyler. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Owens, Senior Advisor to NAACP for Grassroots Voter Protection, and I'm here with my colleague, Stephanie Jones, Senior Legal Advisor to NAACP for the Office of General Counsel. The panelists tonight have shared why this vote matters. Our role is to make sure every single person in this room and everyone that y'all know understands how to cast a ballot and how to do your part to ensure that it's counted. The best person to protect the vote is an informed voter. So tonight, we're going to ask that you remember 4 things. The first one is we want to direct you to a website that does everything for you. You can check your registration. You can find out where to vote. You can find out how to track your ballot. You can find out where to vote early this week. before the 18th of April. If you miss the registration deadline, Virginia has same-day registration. That means the door never closes. So you have no excuse not to register and vote. If you have a mail ballot, depending on the time frame, you're going to want to drop it off at your elections office. You can even drop it off on election day, not put it in the mail. And if you have any problems between now and election day, not just at the polls, but some of the mis and disinformation that we talked about, please call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And I want to talk really quickly through each one. There'll be some links dropped in the chat, but you're also going to receive this information post our webinar today. That one website is elections.virginia.gov. Go to the Citizens Portal. That's the one tool that lets you check to see if you're still on the voter rolls, confirm your address, find your early vote location, and will direct you as to how to check your mail ballot, all in one place. I want to talk about the voter registration deadline, which is Tuesday, 2 days from now. So please, when you're off this call, go to that website, elections.virginia.gov, and make sure that you are registered. Use the Citizen Portal again to find your location. Vote this week. Do not save it for Election Day. Number 2, same-day registration. Let's say you missed Tuesday. I don't know how anybody on this call is going to miss Tuesday because I just asked you to go check so you can make sure that you're registered before Tuesday. But that's another thing. Same-day registration allows you to vote early at any early vote location on or before April 18th or your polling place on Election Day. If you can vote early, if you can register early, please do so. But on Election Day, you can still register and vote. Here's one thing, though, you need to know. You'll be voting a provisional ballot. Don't let the word provisional faze you. Provisional doesn't mean maybe. It means when they verify your information, your vote counts, period. Number 3, mail ballots. I think you all may have heard the Postal Service doesn't postmark your envelope the same day you drop it anymore. It now goes to a regional post office system. Your ballot must be postmarked on or before Election Day, and it must be received by 12 noon on the 24th, or it doesn't count. So don't risk it. If you have a ballot at home, don't wait to put it in the mail. Please take it to a drop box. Drop boxes are at every early vote site through April 18th. And on Election Day, you can drop your ballot off right at your polling place from 6 to 7. Number 4, vote no matter what. I don't care what obstacle you're facing at the polling place, long line, ID issue, whatever it is, don't leave without voting. A provisional ballot cast is a provisional ballot that can be counted. But if you walk out empty-handed, that means 0 chance. So you stay, you vote every time. Lastly, I want to talk about NAACP. You're not in this alone. Stephanie and her team do an amazing work on the legal side. They fight so that you can simply focus on voting. Our attorneys are answering calls on the Election Protection Hotline. We have poll monitors at key sites, especially near college campuses, and we have support through early voting. If you run into any problems, long line, whatever the issue may be, call 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-687-8683, and report that issue. Write that number down, share it with your friends. So the 4 things. Go to the elections.virginia.gov citizen portal, check your registration, make sure you're registered, vote this week. Second thing, there's same day registration, so no one misses out. You have the opportunity to register and vote all the way up until election day. Number three, mail ballot. Don't hold on to it. Post office doesn't work like it used to. Drop it off. Number four, any problems, call 866 our vote. What I really want to convey is keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is you, the voter, still has the power to cast your ballot. The best person to protect your vote is an informed voter. And tonight, that's exactly what you are, informed voters. Thank you. Gayleen, back to you. But before I go back to you, I want to ask Stephanie if there are other specific legal issues that you wanted to mention or anything else that you wanted to raise up for the group.
Thank you, Stephanie. I did want to just make one more point that ties in with what Stephanie said about the power of the voter. You all have the power. Most of the voters in Virginia are going to be able to vote with no problem. And we don't want people to be scared off. We don't want them to worry about it. We just need everybody to go vote. And if you run into a problem, the legal team's got you. But along those lines, that's one of the reasons we're encouraging people to vote early. Because as we've seen, and we've seen in Virginia in the past, we've seen in other places in the past, a lot of the problems that come up occur on election day. And a lot of it is the result of long lines, voter confusion, people going to the wrong place to vote. It's too late then for them to figure it out. And a lot of these things can be avoided completely by voting early. If you go to vote early and you find, you don't have the right ID, or you don't have the right location or whatever, you have plenty of time to remedy it. So we're encouraging people to vote early so that we can avoid those kinds of problems. And a particular reason for that is the lawyers are standing by. The lawyers will be stepping in if problems arise on election day. But the more things we have going in the funnel, the more problems there are. And if there are a lot of problems that could have been avoided, for example, like I said, with long lines or confusion, if we get those out of the way, if we clear the path so that the only thing, or the most important things that the lawyers have to deal with are really critical issues, things that maybe we didn't see coming, or maybe something really that could be a major problem. It's a lot easier for the lawyers to address those problems if we're not dealing with a myriad of other issues that could have been avoided by voting early. So I just want to encourage you all to vote early, and for you to encourage everyone you talk to get that ballot in as soon as possible and try not to wait until election day. So that's my main point, and I will turn it back over to Gayleen.
Great. Thank you so much for being on, Stephanie's and Tyler. This is good information. Look, we need all hands on deck right now, and we have a lot of opportunities for you to get involved. And we want everyone to be wearing their shirts. Wear your NAACP shirts to the polls. You can pass out literature during the week, during early vote. But this Saturday coming up is the last day of early vote. It's our last Souls to the Polls Saturday for this election. So we want everyone to come out there. Let's have party at the poll. Let's have marches. Let's just make this Saturday a big deal, but get as many people to vote from tomorrow up until Saturday. And if they miss that window, then they can vote on election day. But we want everyone to vote early. Wear your shirts. The NAACP is powerful. Has power behind the NAACP. And when you tell them, I'm a member, I'm an officer of the NAACP, and we support voting yes, Don't guess, vote yes. When you say that, that means something. So let's use that. We normally can't be involved in elections because it's partisan. This is nonpartisan. So we can tell folks that the NAACP supported, and we urge you to support yes too. We also, if you see something, say something. You heard both Stephanie say that. And make sure you call 866-R-VOTE. Also, you have groups. There's groups of you all together tonight watching this webinar. Have a phone bank together. Do it on Tuesday. Have a phone bank. Canvas, please. We have walk sheets where you can go and canvas. Make church announcements on Sunday. Have a plan for Sunday to pass out literature at church, and also make announcements that for people to go out and vote on election day. Ask your pastor to come to the polls with you. Ask your pastor to come to the polls on Saturday. So to the polls on that day as well too. So we want to make sure that you all get what you need to make sure that we turn it out. And we're going to be voting up until November the 3rd. Just telling you that right now. So just get ready, because next we're going to be rolling into the primary. And that starts in the middle of June, and then we're going to go into the November election, and the early vote starts in the middle of September. So this is not a one and done. We're just going to be on a cycle of voting up until November the 3rd. So I want to thank you all for being on today. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. Please reach out to us if you need anything, but we need all hands on deck. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our president, Reverend Cozy Bailey.
Thank you, Gayleen, and thank you to all of the esteemed guests that we have had this evening, and thank you all for staying on and listening to a little over 90 minutes of incredibly important information. So now you know the truth. As Gayleen and others have asked you, share it in your circles, your church, your organizations, your neighborhood, and every opportunity you have, make sure that you tell someone, don't guess, vote yes. So if you haven't voted, then go vote. If you are prepared to vote, take someone with you. Let's do this, freedom fighters. We've overcome so many obstacles in the past, and we can overcome this one together as well. Thank you all very much, and have a pleasant rest of your evening.